Drawsteel has a ton of cool features and mechanics like negotiation, montage tests, complications. We've seen videos from folks praising all of these, which is amazing. But at its core, Drawsteel is a class and level-based game. The classes really are the star of the show, and I thought it would be fun to do an overview of them, help you figure out which one is right for your next character. This isn't a build guide or anything. There's already lots of Drawsteel class guides, like this one, or this one, or this one. Links in the doobly-doo below. I'm just going to pitch you on each class, what their shtick is, some of their unique mechanics, and maybe some background on why we made certain decisions. We'll see. We're not going to talk about every action every class can do because there's 9 classes and I don't want this video to be 4,000 hours long. Before we get stuck in, I'm going to start with something that may sound crazy, especially if D&D is the only RPG you've ever played, which is most of our audience. But this is the kind of thing that some people are going to have a lot of feelings about. So let's put our cards on the table. This is going to tell you a lot about this game, including whether you would like it. And it's interesting to me because it may seem very controversial, but there are tons of reviews of this game, including reviews from people who played it before they talked about it. And very few people, if any, bring this up. There is no multiclassing in Drawsteel. That is not a thing in this game. It was never a thing in Drawsteel. We didn't throw out multiclassing because we never put it in the first place. And I'm going to tell you why. There are a lot of reasons, actually, why we never considered multiclassing in this game, but the main one is all of the work we did on the Illrigger, the Beast Heart, and the Talent for 5th edition. We learned a lot making those classes, and the one thing we learned to hate was multiclassing. It was very easy when working on these classes to invent new abilities that were fun, thematically appropriate, balanced with what other classes could do at that level, and everyone praised the design until the testers pointed out that multiclassing broke it. Yeah, that is a super cool ability for the Talent, we all love it, but if you take 3 levels of Rogue before you take 2 levels of Talent, you create a hugely broken, unstoppable killing machine, and the other players never even get to take a turn. That's just a made-up example, but stuff like that happened all the time. Tons of great ideas that were otherwise balanced if you forgot multiclassing existed. But once you gave the players the opportunity to take individual levels in any other class, everything just fell apart. So the classes we could make were hugely stepped-on versions of something cooler, and that drove us crazy, especially when you consider that, according to Wizards of the Coast's own data, only a small minority of players bother with multiclassing. That sucked. Hey, we have this really cool design that you would probably enjoy a lot, but you can't have it because of these few people over here, or really those people in Seattle who thought it was a good idea. That is the main reason we never considered multiclassing. We wanted to give you the coolest, most fun, most evocative abilities we could think of. If you're going to play a Censor, we wanted the power to make the best version of that class so that you would have fun. And I will say that literally nothing that has happened, all during testing, even since release, has caused us to question that decision at all. Now, there are mechanical ways to customize your class to give you some of the flavor and crunch of multiclassing, but actual multiclassing does not exist. There are lots of great class-based games without multiclassing. There are lots of great games that just give you points to spend and you build your hero a la carte with no class at all. But in my opinion, 5e style multiclassing is the worst of both worlds. Now that we have given the very online folks something to chew on, let's talk about the classes in Drawsteel. There are 9 classes in the Heroes book. We're going to go over them in alphabetical order, which also happens to be the order that puts the best class first. Now, this is not my opinion. This is a demonstrable fact. The first class is the Censor. The Censor is a knight of the church sent out into the world to censor the church's enemies, which can broadly be interpreted as whatever monsters you're fighting this week. The Censor's core gameplay revolves around judging enemies. This means putting a judgment on them, like a curse. Every Censor does this. Only Censors do this, for now. Here's how it works. You can only have one creature judged at a time, and this tells you something about the Censor's gameplay. They are a single target, focus one enemy down class. They can do other things, but that's their shtick. Anytime a judged creature uses an action, a main action, which they're going to do every turn, you do damage to them. How much damage? This isn't that kind of video. This isn't a substitute for the rules. I'm just trying to tell you what the classes do, not exactly how they do it. Auto damage every time a judged enemy takes a main action is a pretty big deal, but that's not all. The Censor's heroic resource is Wrath. If your judged enemy is standing next to you and tries to shift away, which is move without provoking an attack of opportunity, you can spend 1 Wrath and say, no, you don't get to do that. You stop them from moving and get a free strike against them. I feel like this class is already super cool and we're only just getting started. If the target of your judgment makes a power roll, which they're probably going to do every round, you can spend 1 Wrath and impose a Bane on that roll. You may be thinking, wow, this is starting to sound like a lot to remember. This is a common reaction when people first start looking at Draw Steal. But things are never as complicated as they first seem in this game. Because in this case, you're only worrying about one enemy. That dude there in particular. So you are watching them like a hawk. Oh, you took an action? Take 4 damage. Oh, is that a power roll? Here's a Bane. It's basically the stuff they were going to do anyway, and they do these things almost every turn. So yeah, it may take a couple of encounters for this stuff to lock in, but that's nothing. That'll happen all by itself. Oh, also, you can spend a Wrath against the target of your judgment to reduce the potency of their abilities. So that moment where the director says to a player, hey, if your might is less than 2, you're grabbed. Now you can spend a Wrath and say, if it's less than 1, which is very powerful because you can just ask your friend, hey, if I lower the potency by 1, so you know it's going to work when you do it. If you damage a judged enemy with a melee attack, you taunt them, which means they take a Bane on attacks that don't include you. Are you kidding? You judged them and smote them. They cannot ignore you. Okay, so that's judgment, which every censor gets, and it's a big deal. Woe betide to the target of the censor's judgment. What about censor subclasses? Well, there's 3. The Exorcist is sort of the most censory censor. They focus on debuffing enemies. The Oracle is more about healing and buffing your allies. They do more weird magic stuff. The Paragon is the more leader class. I'm being vague here because these subclasses all overlap a little, and I would say, this is my personal judgment, mind you, I would say that when you are a censor first, and your subclass second. Your subclass makes a difference, but it's modifying the job of being a censor. Different classes deal with the idea of subclasses differently. On purpose, we wanted to be free to dial in each class to serve its fantasy, as you will see. Like some classes, your subclass tells you what trigger you get, but all censors start with the same trigger. It is one of the most powerful and useful in the game, and that is my life for yours. You can spend your recoveries to heal your allies. This is huge because everybody has some built-in healing, the catch breath maneuver, so people burn through their own recoveries at a pretty good clip. Being able to keep somebody alive without depleting their recoveries is literally a lifesaver. And that life could be yours because you can use my life for yours on you, which by convention is called my life for mine. Or, we would accept my life for more of my life. Censors are a weapon-based class, so they get a kit, and I guess this is a good place to talk about kits. Draw Steal is not about weapons and armor. We thought about this a lot. We documented the whole process on our Patreon, and there's probably a video on the MCDM channel about this, but we originally went in the entire opposite direction, and your weapon and armor choice mattered a lot. But over time, we realized that's not Draw Steal. Your choice of heavy weapon versus light weapon should absolutely matter, but this is not a game about the difference between a bastard sword and a broadsword. A game that really was about that delivered on the promise of those classic D&D weapon charts, that would be a cool game. It would not be Draw Steal. So in Draw Steal, we just focus on those categories: light, medium, heavy, and let you flavor it how you want. A light weapon kit could be a dagger or a rapier or 2 daggers, up to you. But each kit has a specific flavor and you get a unique signature action from it. All heroes start with 2 signature actions. Martial characters who can use kits get 1 signature action from their class and 1 from their kit. Kits also grant some bonus stamina or movement or stability. This isn't the kits video. Kits are an awesome way to flavor the hell out of your hero without worrying about, well, I took double proficiency in broadsword. It would be really nice if this magic longsword were a magic broadsword. As long as the treasure you find is in the broad category of light, medium, and heavy, it will work with your kit. And if you find a weapon or armor that doesn't work with your kit, you can swap out your kit during a respite. Anyway, the Censor can use a kit, not all classes can, so you could be the Shining Knight Censor, classic, or a Panther Kit Censor. Like, what if Conan were a Censor, or a stick and robe Censor? You basically look like Friar Tuck, but you are going to ruin some monster's day with your wrath. Okay, kits are cool, Censors get to use them. What else? Well, the Censor is an agent of the church. We represent that with domains. The Censor gets to pick a domain, probably based on which god or saint you serve. There are 10 domains in the Heroes book, and I'm sure there will be more. Your domain feature gives you a cool ability that is mostly good for non-combat stuff. We included a bunch of gods and saints and which domains they care about in the back of the Heroes book, but one of the reasons we liked the idea of domains is any fantasy setting probably has gods with these domains. You could make up your own god on the spot, just pick a domain for them. So you already know Draw Steel is a game about fighting monsters, but it is also a real RPG with tons of other ways for heroes to interact with the world. Skills, negotiations, montage tests. Your domain abilities are another one. If you take the Death domain, you get Grave Speech, which lets you talk to corpses. I mean, I guess anybody could do that, actually. You can talk to corpses, and they will talk back. Love domain? You get the Blessing of Compassion. You grant allies edges when they're using skills, and you gain a bonus in negotiations, right? So it's love, not sex or passion, but empathy, compassion, that stuff. There are some domains that are good for fighting, like the War domain, which you would expect. You get Sanctified Weapon, that lets you bless a weapon and it does +1 damage. That's not much, but remember, you don't miss in this game. You always do +1 damage, and that adds up. That is the pitch for the Censor. You are a single target specialist. You judge somebody and they are going to have a bad day. Why did we call it the Censor? Well, because we were inspired. It seemed like a cool name for this job. In fact, I think the name basically came first. You are not a paladin. You do not ride out dispensing justice. You judge people. You dispense wrath. And that, to us, is a meaningful difference. It is a flavorful difference. We did not change anything from Paladin. There was never a Paladin in Draw Steel. This class started as the Censor, with that fantasy of being a little more sinister than a Paladin. We originally imagined each Censor subclass would be specialized against certain categories of enemies, like a demon Censor or an undead Censor, but that, as it turned out, was a bad idea. For a lot of reasons, some of which are obvious. I don't want to turn this into a dev diary. We'll do a live stream here on YouTube this Saturday, as is traditional after new video. You folks can ask whatever you want. But basically, it would suck to be an anti-demon specialist when you're not fighting demons. Obvious in retrospect, but sometimes an obvious problem has obvious or non-obvious solutions, and you don't know until you try it. The second class in Draw Steel, wow, this is going to be a long video. The second class is the Conduit, sort of the other side of the Censor. The Censor is a single target church agent. The Conduit is a generalist church agent. You get 2 domains, so you are twice as versatile as the Censor. That is a big deal. At first level, the list of domains and domain features is the same for the Conduit as the Censor. But that's where the similarities stop, because the Conduit is about their domains. The Conduit does not have subclasses. Your domains are your subclasses, and you don't just get 2 of them, you get bonuses from them for 6 out of 10 levels. Some of these are features, which is Draw Steel jargon for a cool thing that is mostly useful out of combat, but half of them are abilities, meaning things with power rolls. So while the Censor's choice of domain is mostly about flavor, because the Censor has its own subclasses, the Conduit's choice of domains defines your character as much, maybe more, than choosing a subclass. I think technically, if you do the combinatorics, that means there's like 45 Conduit subclasses, 45 ways to mix and match 10 domains. It's a lot. But we really wanted your choice of god to matter. You are a conduit to your god. You're not just a random person who prays. You literally channel the power of a divine being. Surely who that being is should matter. But doing that was going to be a lot of work. Way more work than a normal class with 3 subclasses. We had a whole meeting about this, and it seemed like the build a god system was going to be too much work. So we decided not to do that. Give them normal subclasses like everyone else. After that meeting, our executive producer, who I think had just started that week, called up James, the lead designer, and said, I feel like we had a really unique idea we were all excited by, and we ditched it because it would be hard. Yeah, that is what we were doing, and that is not the MCDM way. The MCDM way is let each thing, each class, ancestry, product, be the best version of itself it can be. So we regrouped and thought and realized, hang on, you get 2 domains, right? And there's 2 different kinds of option in Draw Steel. There are features, which are things that are mostly useful out of combat, and abilities that are mostly fighting thingies. So what if we broke it up? We could say this level, you get a feature from one of your 2 domains. Next level, you get the other feature from your other domain. This level, you get one ability from one domain. Next level, the other ability from the other domain. Alternating between features and abilities while making sure you eventually get both from both domains meant we only needed 60 abilities across 10 levels. That's still a lot, but we could do that. So we did. I think it is the best implementation of the Holy Spellcaster out there. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but we wanted the Conduit to be awesome. Whatever the opposite of, I hate having to be the healer is, the Conduit is that. Now, you're not any more powerful than any other class. You have the same number of options in combat, but you can make whatever god you want. Pick any 2 domains, and you have essentially invented a subclass. Delivering that kind of variety and customization was worth doing the work. You know, we only had to do that work once, and then tens of thousands of people benefit from it for years. It's worth it. The Conduit's heroic resource is Piety, and it works very differently from the Censor's Wrath. You get 1d3 Piety each round. Some classes get 2 resource every round, some get 1d3. Based on whether we thought that class was more about order versus chaos. Fun little detail. So the Conduit is 1d3 because the gods are fickle. Speaking of fickle gods, uniquely among the classes, the Conduit can petition their god or saint for more of their heroic resource, right? The fantasy of, this is an emergency, I need more juice. You decide whether to do this before you gain your resource. You can decide to pray at the beginning of your turn and then roll for Piety. If you roll a 3, you get 3 Piety, that's normal, and because you decided to pray, you gain an additional 2 Piety, so 5, which is a lot at level 1. And you activate a unique domain effect. The Censor uses the same domain list, but they don't get Piety effects. So, like a Storm domain Conduit, if they pray and roll a 3, they get an instant lightning strike that zaps a bunch of enemies. Yeah, pretty cool. Domain effects are awesome, but you need to pray and roll a 3 to activate them. If you pray and roll a 2 for Piety, you just get +1 Piety. Not bad. So why not always pray? Well, because if you roll a 1, the gods are literally annoyed. They are busy. There's a lot going on, and you work for the gods, not the other way around. You still get 1 extra Piety, so 2 instead of 1, because you prayed, but the gods literally punish you and zap you for 1d6 damage. Lol. That was the gods saying lol, not me. Now, of course, whenever there's an ability like this, there are always some players who say, well, I would simply never pray. However light the punishment might be doesn't matter to them. Any downside is too much. But we have found many of these folks report back, and there comes a time when the chips are down and you got your back against the wall, and suddenly that extra Piety starts to sound real good. And they take the chance. Sooner or later, you're going to ask the gods for a little something extra. Conduits don't use kits because spellcasters don't get kits. Kits are, by definition, a martial loadout, and there isn't an equivalent gear-based fantasy for spellcasters. So spellcasters like the Conduit get 2 other ways to customize their abilities. For the Conduit, it's prayers and wards. I think all the spellcasters get wards of different kinds. Wards and prayers are always on. You can swap them out during downtime, and they basically combine to be like a kit. They are ways to get bonuses to stamina, stability, movement, and some other cool magic stuff kits don't get. By the way, you may have noticed the iconic Conduit is Dazar, who is an MCDM dwarf, and MCDM dwarves do not look like generic dwarves. That's fine. Most people already probably have their own setting and use generic dwarves. But if you want an authentic MCDM dwarf mini, we have you covered. Actually, TitanCraft has you covered. They have a ton of original MCDM minis, including the War Dogs. But we're going to talk about that later. Right now, we're talking about conduits. Okay, why did we call it the Conduit? Why not call it? Well, we had already been using the term in our fiction and design for 5e. Priests open a conduit to their god. That's where their power comes from. People in the world call them all kinds of things. Priests, shamans, god callers. But the technical term used by sages and lore masters is conduit. We never considered using any other term, which, by the way, we have never had any reason to regret. People sometimes say, why not just call it whatever the D&D name is? But it turns out those are also the people who say stuff like, why did you take Smite away? Why did you throw out the D20? Which is just baffling. We didn't take anything away from anyone. We didn't change anything. We started with these names and these ideas, and we like them. So if you like Draw Steel, that is mostly a result of us starting from first principles. We did not start with a list of D20 classes. We started with a list of classic archetypes, like the classic arcane spellcaster, which in Draw Steel is the Elementalist. Elementalists, called mages in common speech, manipulate the elements to do cool stuff. If you're looking for the Fireball class, this is it. Actually, it's better than the Fireball class because Elementalist spells have cool names like the Flesh, a Crucible, which does a shitload of fire damage to somebody. And Elementalist can do this cool thing other classes can't do, which is cause some spells to persist. Persistent spells are awesome. If you cast the Flesh, a Crucible on round 1, next round you can spend 1 essence, the Elementalist's heroic resource, to keep that spell going without spending an action. So on round 1, you use your main action and spend 3 essence to cast the Flesh, a Crucible. And then next round, spend 1 essence and no action and just keep the Flesh, a Crucible going. They just keep burning. Roll damage again and cast another spell. My friend Lindsay is playing an Elementalist in my Wednesday night game, and she understood how persistent spells worked. But once she started doing it, once it was real, she was hooked. Way cooler than managing spell slots. Unlike the Conduit, Elementalists have normal subclasses, and as you would expect, your subclass is your elemental specialization. There are 4 subclasses for the 4 elements: Earth, Fire, Green, and Void. You may have noticed, those are not the classical 4 Greek elements. So let's talk about this. When we decided our mage was an Elementalist, we had to figure out what the elements are. I mean, in the world, in Orden, what are Orden's elements? Just doing earth, air, fire, and water seemed like a major wasted opportunity. But at the same time, people would be real disappointed if they couldn't be a fire mage or an earth mage. Okay, that makes sense. So maybe Orden just has more than those 4 elements. At the same time, people really like fire mages and earth mages, but water mages and air mages? Does the water mage just wet people to death? That's when we hit upon the idea that the elements are not literal. Fire does not only mean fire. Fire is about destruction, which can mean fire. That idea unlocked the whole class for us. The elements are metaphors. Air for speed, earth for strength, fire for destruction, and water for change. Then we started thinking about new elements. What else might there be? And we hit upon 3 more. Green for growth, rot for decay, and void for the mystery, that which cannot be known. That seemed amazing. We all loved this. We had the classic elements, but each of them had an abstract idea behind them. Water, representing change, is amazing. And we had some unique elements: green, rot, and void. Folks love those. But the problem is, we didn't have room for 7 subclasses or time to test them all. No problem. We'll do 4 now. 4 subclasses is still a lot, and the rest later. We chose 2 classics, fire and earth, and then 2 of the new ones, green and void. These subclasses are really different. The fire mage is basically the classic fireball class, but the green mage is a lot more like a druid, and the void mage is too cool to describe here. It is very cool. It is a unique take on the classic wizard class. It has wizardly elements, fireball, teleport, but also stuff we associate with other archetypes like healing and shape change. In other words, you're not a wizard. You're an elementalist. So if you're wondering why 7 elements but only 4 subclasses, it is literally just because we wanted to know, how does the world work first? What are the elements of Orden? 7 elements, very cool. Then we figure out, okay, how many subclasses can we fit in here? That's it. The air, water, and rot mages will show up on the Patreon at some point, and then in a future product later, I'm sure. So that's the Elementalist. They get persistent magic, they have cool subclasses, and if you make the right choices, you can turn into a bear at 5th level. Want to turn into a bear earlier than that? Well, remember how I said the Elementalist is a unique take on the idea of a wizard? The Fury is our version of the anger-based warrior, the barbarian or berserker. Again, we never for a moment considered barbarian as a class name. We started with the idea of the Fury. People in the world use all kinds of words for heroes of this class, but Fury is one of them. Very popular with orcs, for instance. The Fury is a DPS class. You can do a lot of damage if you take the right powers, but the Fury is also the forced movement specialist, one of them, one of 2 of them. The Fury accumulates ferocity. Unlike the Censor or the Conduit or the Elementalist, the Fury gets bonuses based on how much of their heroic resource they have saved up, which creates this tension, drama, between saving it and spending it on your heroic actions. Unlike the other classes, the Fury doesn't get a special maneuver. Instead, saving your ferocity modifies the generic knockback maneuver. Anyone can use a maneuver to try to push an enemy away, but you specialize in this. How you modify the knockback maneuver depends on what kind of Fury you are, what your subclass is. There are 3 subclasses: the Reaver, the Berserker, and the other one. The Berserker is more brute strength. The Reaver is more cunning and guile. They both have a growing ferocity table that tells you what you get when you save up your ferocity. Like, if you have 4 ferocity, you gain a surge the first time in a round that you knock someone back. Very powerful. When you first look at your growing ferocity table, you may think, well, these bonuses don't seem like that big a deal. I'll probably just spend my ferocity and not worry about this. Sure, that is a choice. But I watched Phil playing Draugr literally say, this sucks. I want to spend it and keep it. Yeah, Furies are a martial class, so they get a kit. The Reaver and Berserker get kits. The other one? The 3rd Fury subclass is the Stormwight. The Stormwight Fury does not get a kit because the Stormwight Fury channels their ferocity into a beast shape. They can shapeshift into a beast form at level 1, like a bear or become a person-bear hybrid. They can change into a werebear, a werewolf, a were-raven, or a were-rat. And each of these get unique abilities. Why a were-rat? We think rat folk are cool. Each of these forms has its own growing ferocity chart. Why can they do this? Can you guess the answer? Because we thought it was cool. Actually, that is a glib answer, although it is deeply accurate. The real reason they can do this is we couldn't really think of any more subclasses after the first 2. Or I should say, none of our ideas were as strong as those first 2. And we'd been wondering, was there a class that was the shapeshifter class? Like a skinwalker or a lycanthrope or whatever? And while we were in the Fury meeting, we were hit with this flash of insight. The Stormwight Fury. Why are they called that? I don't know. It just sounded right. I think maybe it's storm for change. Once we had this idea, everybody got really excited. It made sense in a way I'm not sure I can explain. If Bruce Banner can turn into the Hulk when he gets angry, why can't the Fury Hulk out when they get angry? So those are the 3 kinds of Fury. You know what the Fury is about. They are an anger-based DPS warrior with lots of cool, unique options focusing on shoving people around. One thing people notice is that as your Fury levels up and your abilities get more and more ridiculous, the Fury starts tapping into the source or origin of the Fury's supernatural abilities, and that is primordial chaos. And I'm going to say some nerd shit right now. Remember how there's 7 elements? There are also 2 fundamental principles, and these are order and chaos. And the Fury can tap into that primordial chaos to do extraordinary things at higher levels. At low levels, the Fury is more mundane. But at higher levels, stuff gets real interesting. Okay, that is weird. Some people think it is too weird, and they would prefer it if there was a purely mundane Fury-type class. We understand. But allow me to explain. Drawsteel goes from 1st to 10th level. At 10th level, we wanted your hero to feel like Thor or Hercules. That is the power level we are going for. Okay, do you notice anything those two guys have in common? They are both gods, or godlike, right? So there's a reason they can do the insane things they can do. Hercules isn't just a strong guy or the strongest guy. He is the son of Zeus. So whenever the writers need him to do some mind-bending bullshit, they just say, yeah, well, son of Zeus, shut up. The Hulk can do what he does, not because he's just very angry. No way. The Hulk can do some mind-bending shit, especially if you read Immortal Hulk, which you should, because he's been mutated by gamma rays, and not real-world gamma rays, but comic book gamma rays, which are way cooler. So when someone asks for a purely mundane 10th level Fury, we do not know what they mean. You mean somebody who can do what the Hulk does, but just because he's mad? I have seen people get maximally angry. They cannot punch their way into another dimension. This is the same reason there isn't a purely mundane fighter class. First level? Sure. Even second level? But 10th level? What? So that may not be to your taste. That is fine, but that is the explanation. I guess I should add, while we're talking about it, there is not a grand unified theory of magic in Draw Steel. There are lots of ways to break the rules of reality in Orden, and there is no explanation that covers all of them. I feel like I have to say this because we saw a lot of folks in the Discord who assumed there was or must be some single underlying explanation for all supernatural phenomenon, so they were trying to figure out how to do everything with essence, for instance. Nope. There are lots of different kinds of magic. They are not all related, and we may never see all of them. Now we jump from F for Fury all the way down to N and get one of my favorite classes, the Null. The Null is our unarmed melee martial artist hero with a twist. The Null is inherently psionic. So remember how the Fury can do wildly supernatural things at higher levels because of the primordial chaos? Well, we wanted to let the I punch people class also do extraordinary things, and I felt like there needed to be an explanation. We have monks and martial artists here in the real world. They cannot punch someone's soul out of their body. Psionics explains why the Null can do what it was. The talent is about using psionics for perfection of mind. The Null uses psionics for perfection of body. The Null's heroic resource is discipline. They are students of perfect order. And because we like the idea that magic and supernatural nonsense is inherently chaotic, the Null is an anti-magic class. That was a core part of the original pitch. Again, we didn't start out with monk. We started out with the idea of the Null. We started with the name and the pitch. That's where the name comes from. The Null projects a null field around them that dampens magic. How? Well, it reduces enemy potency. Right? So a fireball that lights everybody on fire if their agility is less than 2. If there's a Null around, it has to be less than 1, which means more heroes can avoid being lit on fire. It took us a long time to figure out what anti-magic meant, because magic covers a broad array of weird abilities, but eventually we realized we were overthinking it, and just letting the Null lower enemy potency was the right idea. Sure, enemies have non-magical abilities with a potency check, but we didn't feel like we had to be slaves to that narrative idea. Lowering all enemy potency was really cool, no one else could do it, and it was very like the idea of a magic dampening field. It's basically a magic dampening field plus. So we went with it, and people really seem to love the Null. Null subclasses use a lot of the same language as the talent, because they're both psionic. So you have the chronokinetic, who manipulates time, the cryokinetic, who slows people down, and the metakinetic, who enhances their body. But they mostly do all these things while punching people. The Null does not get a kit, because we are serious about the unarmed part. Unarmed means unarmed, not maybe a stick, or 2 sticks, or sticks with daggers on them. Nope, you are an unarmed combat master. As Ardashir, the iconic Null, says, any weapon can be turned against the hand that wields it. I require no implements. I suffice. But they do get psionic augmentations, which grant minor kit-like bonuses. Nulls also get cool stuff based on how much discipline they have saved up, just like the Fury does with ferocity. It is a super unique class. There is nothing else exactly like it in any other game, I think. I saw someone say these psionic abilities reuse a lot of the same language in their names. That is a valid criticism. There is probably a better version of the Null and the Talent out there somewhere where their powers have more different names. But in the race to get a product done in a timely manner, knowing that moving people around meant manipulating gravity, and therefore the power should be gravitic something, was very useful. And it sounds a lot like 80s Marvel superhero powers, which we like. Null abilities also tend to say blow or strike because we wanted to remind people you are mostly punching and kicking and headbutting people. Even an ability like a squad unto myself that lets you attack everyone within 2 squares of you. We imagine that's you running around the battlefield like a speedster, punching tons of people before returning to where you started. There's a lot of that comic book speedster archetype in the Null. But at the end of the day, they are a martial class. The next class is also a martial class, and that is the Shadow. The Shadow is our stealthy, sneaky, thief-like class, and just like everything else in the game, we didn't throw out or change the name thief or rogue or whatever. We started with the name Shadow, because, yeah, the Shadow is a stabby, dagger-type class, but they can do extraordinary things at first level because they are trained in the use of shadow magics. That's how we explain or sort of unlock the ability to do really weird stuff, especially at higher levels. We invented the idea that to become a shadow, you study at a shadow college. These aren't literally like universities, they're more like secret societies, but I think they're about as formal, as rigorous, just hard to find, hard to get into. The Shadow was one of the first classes we designed. It was an immediate hit. It's one of the reasons we got so excited early because the Shadow and the Tactician were so cool already. The Shadow has one of the best, most iconic triggers in the game. Hesitation is weakness. No magic, just immediately take your turn after another player finishes theirs. It is really, really simple. The director says, okay, the Tactician is done, now the Ogre will... And you get to say, no. Hesitation is weakness. I go next. Remember, in Draw Steel, one hero acts and then some monsters act, and it goes back and forth like that. Playing a Shadow means 2 heroes can go after the other, and that can completely change the battle. It unlocks insane combos and versatility, and they can do all this at first level. All Shadows can do this. It is one of the things that defines the class. The Shadow has 3 subclasses, and me, personally, I think of the College of Black Ash as the iconic Shadow subclass, the shadowiest subclass. College of Black Ash Shadows get a trigger that lets them teleport out of danger at first level, and that's one of those moments where players coming from D20 Fantasy look around and they say, I can do this at first level? Yeah, wait till you can see what you can do at 10th level. You will understand why I stab them from behind does not work as a Draw Steel class. You need some reason you can do these extraordinary things. I will admit, part of the fun of designing the Shadow was coming up with the names for the subclasses. We knew there was a stealth subclass, a potions and poisons subclass, and a disguise and illusion subclass, and I just made up names for them on the spot in the meeting. I didn't overthink it. I just said, College of Black Ash, College of Caustic Alchemy, and the College of the Harlequin Mask. They were an immediate hit, I think, because I didn't overthink it. I know I said the Black Ash Shadow is the iconic Shadow, but you really need to see what the Harlequin Mask Shadow can do. You could almost fight an entire battle without the bad guys even knowing you were there. All they see is just another one of their own guys acting kind of weird. So that's the Shadow. It ranks high on a lot of people's list of the most straightforward classes. Because in spite of all the magic nonsense, there's no null field or persistent magic to worry about. It's pretty much just use shadow magics to mess people up. Hopefully it's clear now to anybody watching, these classes are all wildly different from each other. Everybody gets a trigger, 2 signature actions, and 2 heroic actions at first level. So people looking in at Draw Steel from the outside sometimes say, wow, all the classes are all the same. But if you have made it this far in the video, you know that is not true. The classes all play super different. They have not just unique abilities, but entirely unique mechanics. I think the fact that everybody has a trigger, everybody has 2 signature actions, etc., helps you manage all that weirdness. Also, remember what I said about how you could get an MCDM Dwarf Mini from TitanCraft? Well, you notice that the iconic Shadow is Gwiliv, the Woad Elf, and Woad Elves are a little weird. They have these huge scooping ears. Well, TitanCraft has Woad Elf minis too, and you can make all sorts of cool characters with them. More on that later. Oh yeah, one last Shadow thing. Playing a shadow means if, after years of hunting, you find the man who killed your father when you were a child or whatever, and the villain says, "After all these years, how did you find me?" You get to say, "One thing you must know, no man can escape his shadow." You can just do that if you want. Let's pretend I made that dialogue up. Okay, 6 classes down, 3 to go, and we are now in the terrible T's, and the last 3 classes all start with T. The Tactician is, I think, what you would imagine from the name. Everybody else is playing their instrument. The Tactician plays the orchestra. They grant their allies free attacks. They taunt their enemies, forcing or strongly encouraging them to focus on the Tactician. They can mark an enemy, which is basically telling the team, focus on that one, granting everybody bonuses. They are weapon masters. They are battlefield commanders. They are the only strictly mundane class in the game. And this was hard. It took a lot of work, a lot of iteration to give them tactical abilities that were as cool as everybody else's and fit the theme and fantasy of being a tactical mastermind without inventing a bunch of abilities where you would say, yeah, this is super cool, but how am I doing this? Like, you can imagine how being able to command your allies and taunt your enemies is cool at first level without magic, but 10th level? How can you, a literally normal person, keep up with Thor and Hercules? Well, we got there, but it required a lot of discipline. Throwing out cool abilities that just didn't make sense for a non-magical class. Again, this is the reason there isn't a weapon master class, a mundane fighting class. We thought there would be a weapon master tactician subclass, but at the end of the day, our game isn't about weapons. That's where the idea of kits came from. And we all thought, surely all tacticians are weapon masters. That's why the Tactician's iconic ability is Field Arsenal. The Tactician gets 2 kits. They get the benefits of both. They don't stack, meaning if one kit gives you +1 stability and the other grants you +2, you don't get +3 stability, you get +2. But getting the best of 2 worlds opens up some amazing choices. Now, we do not explain how this works. How am I both wearing armor and not wearing armor? Well, you are so well trained, you are as good at fighting in armor as somebody without armor. So you get the stamina bonus from the armor kit and the movement bonus from the unarmed kit. Kits are one of the coolest things in the game, I think, and the Tactician's ability to combine any 2 kits it is an incredible customization option. Now, since you're getting 2 signature abilities from your 2 kits, you don't have the same array of choices from your own signature abilities the way other classes do. But you do get Strike Now, which is a main action you can do every round. We'll talk about that in a second. The Tactician subclasses are the Insurgent, a kind of dirty tricks behind the enemy lines commando tactician. The Mastermind, who's a battlefield controller faking out entire squads of enemies with feints and distractions. And the Vanguard tactician, who is sort of the most tactician-y tactician, the lead from the front tactician. The Tactician's iconic abilities are the Mark, where you pick an enemy and your friends all get bonuses when attacking them. Lots of your later abilities modify your mark. And Strike Now, which all tacticians get, that lets you use your action to let an ally make a signature attack. The Mark is killer because, among other things, you can spend 1 focus, the Tactician's heroic ability, to let an ally spend a recovery when they attack the target of your mark. So the Tactician is a kind of off healer. 1 recovery for 1 focus, that's awesome. That is good healing. The Conduit is a better healer, but the Tactician is pretty good. And they have other healing abilities like Inspiring Strike, which damages an enemy, and one hero, could be you, can spend a recovery. While you're around, your allies feel like we can win. And that feeling is spending a recovery, regaining stamina. That's why we chose to call it stamina instead of health or hit points. It's a lot easier to imagine how you're wearing somebody down, exhausting them until they can't defend themselves anymore, and it's easier to imagine how somebody like the Tactician can inspire someone to greater glory. You suddenly feel less wiped out. You get your second wind. You get hope. Strike Now, the ability that lets you use your action to grant an ally a signature strike, is good because there are often other players whose signature action would be better than yours against this enemy or in this position. The Tactician has abilities that grant all their allies free movement. You get ability at first level, are you ready for this, called This Is What We Plan For, that lets 2 of your allies go immediately after you. I mean, they can't already have acted, and it costs 5 focus. But damn, you thought hesitation is weakness was cool? I mean, it is. because it's basically free. But wow, the Tactician is no joke. And when there's a Tactician and a Shadow, well, this is what we plan for, is a maneuver. So the Tactician can attack an enemy and then use their maneuver for, this is what we plan for, letting the Fury and the Elementalist go. And then the Shadow can use hesitation as weakness after that. 4 heroes are all going at basically the same time. Amazing. At first level. Okay, so that's the Tactician. They get cool out-of-combat stuff too. They are great to have around during a negotiation, for instance. All classes get cool stuff they can do out of combat. It's nothing like D20 Fantasy, where there's just a million spells for everything that, in my experience, make it real hard to challenge the players out of combat, especially after 5th level. I remember one of my favorite modules, Night Below, had to do all of this work to basically nerf the hero's stuff just so there could be a 7th level adventure. Like the Underdark suppressed teleportation magic, except at certain nodes. None of that in Draw Steel. Characters have cool, flavorful options out of combat, but you can still run something like a mystery without the heroes just casting a spell that solves it. Speaking of spell casting, the Talent is our psionic spellcaster. They're a generalist like the Elementalist and the Conduit, but they have a unique ability called Strain. The Talent's heroic resource is Clarity. They get some every round, and Strain lets you basically go into Clarity debt. Spend Clarity you don't have yet, right? You are literally straining yourself, pushing your body past its limits to save your friends. Save the world. Classic psionic hero stuff. Strain lets you manifest expensive powers in an emergency when you otherwise couldn't afford it, even at the very beginning of the first fight. At first level, you can go to -3 Clarity. So at the beginning of your turn, when you roll for Clarity, if you get a 2, you could immediately manifest a 5-cost heroic ability like Iron that turns somebody's body, either yours or an ally's, into solid living iron. So their stability goes way up, they get extra stamina, and 2 surges. Strain is very powerful and it makes the Talent hugely versatile, but it comes at a cost. At the end of your turn, you take damage equal to your negative Clarity. It's not a lot of damage, but this is Draw Steel and every point counts. Because no one misses, not even the monsters. Okay, so as you can guess, there are always players who, even if it's only 1 damage, say, well, I would simply never go into Clarity debt. Sure, that is an option. But some of your powers do something extra if you use them while strained. Strained effects always do something cool, but they often, not always, but often have a drawback. Like, oh, this fire power has a bigger area. That's good, but it doesn't stick around the way it normally would. That's bad. That kind of thing. This gives you a little extra thingy if you decide to strain yourself. And this is maybe the only piece of advice I'm giving in this video. If you decide to play a talent, you should consider using strain. Go into Clarity debt. Not all the time, but look at it as a tool you can use, not a thing to be avoided. If you try to avoid it, you may discover the talent isn't as punchy as some of the other classes. Yeah, because you're never taking advantage of what is basically free resources. Like the Elementalist, we tell you what all the talent subclasses are, even though there's only 3 of them in the book, because we wanted people to understand how the world works. This is how psionics works. There's 8 traditions, but we didn't want to charge people shipping for a 40-pound book, so we included 3. The Telepath, who messes with enemy minds, the Telekinetic, who hurls things and people around the battlefield, and the Chronopath, who manipulates time. The Chronopath gets one of the best and most useful triggers in the entire game. Again lets you rewind time, so an enemy or ally has to re-roll 1 power roll. That you're going to use that every round, and everyone is going to love you. Speaking of something everybody loves, our last class is, I think, the most unique, which does not make any sense because unique means there's only one. So nothing can be more unique than anything else. But the Troubadour is more unique, as you will see. The Troubadour is our all-fighting, all-singing, all-dancing magic storyteller class, and if that sounds like a lot, it is. It covers a lot. The Troubadour's heroic resource is drama, and there are a lot of ways to gain drama, one of which is, if a hero dies, you gain 10 drama. And if that hero is you, you can continue to gain drama even while dead. And if you get to 30 drama, which has already happened in some games, you don't die. No, of course I didn't die. What? No, that was an earlier draft of the script, and my agent made some calls, and now everything's fine. So I'm back. What? Shut up. The Troubadour's abilities are just the coolest and weirdest I've seen in any RPG. I mean, period. You get abilities like Continuity Error, where an enemy suddenly appears in 2 places at once, each with half the original's hit points, making it easier to attack them. Extensive Rewrites lets you move all the enemies around. You're like literally rewriting the scene. There's an ability called Classic Chandelier Stunt, because you gotta be able to swing across the room on a chandelier. You're a swashbuckling action hero. All Troubadours get routines, which are these aura abilities that buff all nearby allies. There are 3 Troubadour subclasses, and this is where things get interesting. The Duelist Troubadour focuses on dramatic swordplay, so lots of damage, but it's all very theatrical. It's stage sword fighting, and this is super fun. Like, the Duelist has an ability called Star Power, an ability that gives you a bonus to speed, and you can't get a tier 1 result on your next power roll. Basically, you are the star of this movie, and it's an action movie. The Virtuoso Troubadour is... I mean, there's lots of ways to flavor your Virtuoso Troubadour, but I think of them as, you are basically Steve Vai. You are a guitar hero. You have an ability called Power Chord. I saw Beat on their second show, and it's Danny Carey and Adrian Belew and Tony Levin, and any one of them would have been worth the cost. But also, standing about 30 feet away from me was Steve Vai. It was like 3 legendary musicians and a space wizard. I digress. The Virtuoso focuses on music and performance, so you have your own unique songs that modify the Troubadour's routines. If the Duelist is the DPS class, you're more like a controller. But, and this is important, we don't like the idea of, oh, I'm the healer, therefore I only heal. Nah, with very few exceptions, we always want every class, regardless of subclass, to have variety. So Virtuoso uses music to buff allies and debuff enemies, but also has cool DPS powers. The last subclass of the last class of this video is the weirdest and most interesting, and the one I think I am the proudest of in the entire game, and that is the Auteur Troubadour. You are the writer. You are the storyteller. We almost called this subclass playwright, but folks heard that and thought, you mean like screenwriter? But no, you're more like Kit Marlowe, writer and duelist, and a bunch of other stuff. The Auteur Troubadour is sort of like a controller or a tactician. You know what? Let's just look at some Auteur abilities. The Auteur has an ability called Fix It in Post, which is a phrase that means we didn't get it right when we shot this scene, but we'll fix it back in the studio after we wrap. It lets you take conditions on people and change them into other conditions. Oh, don't worry, Dale. Brannigan isn't weakened. He's just prone. Oh no. That monster isn't slowed. They're bleeding. Right? Like you're editing the movie of the battle. That's the fantasy. I just picked that ability at random. The Auteur does tons of weird stuff like that, like guest star that lets you literally add a new character to the battle. How is the Auteur doing this? Good question. Well, it's about the fantasy of, I'll just read the sidebar. Not a lot of classes need a unique sidebar to explain their fantasy. Abilities like guest star, missed cue, and twist at the end allow the Auteur to rewrite bits of what happens in the battle by temporarily removing creatures from an encounter, bringing people back to life, or causing a new ally to appear. These allies and features are no more powerful than any other, but they're narratively very different from shooting rays of fire or swinging a sword. This is because, uniquely among all the classes in Draw Steel, the Auteur knows that the combat playing out at your table is really a story being told sometime later, probably in a tavern. When the Auteur uses these abilities, they are changing that story. They rewrite stories to make them more dramatic in the telling. What actually happened? Well, that's a matter of some debate. Even the people who were there don't agree on exactly what took place. How people remember it is what's important. This is pretty weird, but also very fun. If it's too weird for you or your table, you can always interpret those abilities as a kind of magic, a school of conjuring that really does change the battlefield, which the Auteur merely flavors as rewriting the story. Okay, so you either love that or you do not. And it's not all about the Auteur. I don't want to oversell it. There are tons of showbiz references all throughout the Troubadour. It's not just this subclass that's for theater nerds. It's the whole shebang. Those are the 9 classes, folks, and we're already working on more. The Summoner is in open beta right now and should come out later this year. We're also really far along with the Beast Heart, our pet class, And next year, you might get the Acolyte and the Operator. All the content we make for Draw Steel, if it has a PDF version, the patrons get it first, and they get to see the playtest versions and read all the behind-the-scenes stuff. We'll do a whole video later about the future of Draw Steel, what products we're working on. You're going to get a video just about ancestries in Draw Steel. Should be shorter than this one. Speaking of ancestries, you heard me talking about how TitanCraft lets you make your own Draw Steel dwarves and Draw Steel woad elves. Well, they are running a whole crowdfunder right now, just showing off all our ancestries, all of them. You can make your own Polder or Hakan, Time Raiders, Memenek. They are amazing. They look really cool. We love the art style. And if you've never used it, actually I got a bunch of them here. Here is one of the Hakan. This is basically Artashir. Love it. And this is how big he is compared to a normal dude. I realize you can't see the detail. Go check out the website. I was so blown away when I saw these. The quality on these is incredible. Anyway, shut up. There's a script to read. It's incredible. You can do some extraordinary stuff with poses and gear, and it's just, you can spend hours making your own minis. These guys are an official licensee. They reached out to us and said, we think your game is amazing. We love it. We want to make minis for all the ancestries. And we looked at their stuff and we were blown away. I mean, we knew who TitanCraft were, so we were pretty excited when they reached out to us. In case you don't know, TitanCraft lets you make your own custom 3D minis, which you can either print yourself. 3D printers are amazing now and getting cheaper and better all the time, or they will print it themselves and send it to you. They aren't painted, but they are highly detailed and customizable. Looking at these 3D printed minis, this guy is a Dragon Knight. Looking at these 3D printed minis, I think they are as good as high quality resin, which was not true just a few years ago. I am honestly starting to think this is just the best way to do minis, because you can get exactly the mini you want. Well, now that's nice for players, but what about us directors? If you're like me, you are probably a director or a dungeon master or a game master, and you often have to proxy a lot of your minis. Sure, it's cool that the players can make their own custom hero mini, but I need a lot of undead, for instance. And it would be nice if I had enough skeletal archers so everybody can just see, oh, that's a skeletal archer. But what actually happens is I only have 2 Bodus and I just have to ask folks to remember, oh, these ghouls, these are actually skeletal archers. I do that every week. No more. Because TitanCraft has a feature that lets you build squads of bad guys. It is perfect for directors, for anybody running a game that uses minis. And not only can you make squads of undead, good for any game, you can make squads of our dwarves. Dwarves make great bad guys. And maybe the coolest thing in this entire video full of cool stuff, you can make your own squads of war dogs. The war dogs are one of the best things in Draw Steel. I think they're our iconic villain squad. There is nothing exactly like them anywhere else. You can tweak them and customize them, and it's just amazing. I love them. You know what? You don't need to listen to me. Just go check out TitanCraft's Kickstarter. The TitanCraft folks are super cool. We were really lucky we got to partner with them. And if you want your own unique Draw Steel mini or a whole squad of Draw Steel bad guys or regular bad guys, go check out their crowdfunder. Go check out their website. Just play around with it, and I think you will be amazed. In fact, let's do this. Let's get together here this Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific for our normal post-video live stream, and we'll spend some time messing around with the TitanCraft software. It will be fun. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, folks. Next video, well, it's either going to be the lessons from the Draw Steel adventure I just finished, or a Draw Steel ancestry guide, or something completely unrelated to Draw Steel. All of these things are coming. I just don't know which video is next. Until next time, peace out.